All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you. It is The Zone presented by Google Fiber. We'll talk Royals coming up in the noon hour with Joel Goldberg. But realignment, the bombshell report that came out yesterday with Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC. We'll get into that here in just a second. But real quick, Corey, there is another cryptic tweet from Tyrann Mathieu. We've been following these cryptic tweets from Tyrann as this contract negotiation, or maybe not, an extension going on with camp reporting on Monday for the veterans. What's the tweet, Corey?
There's actually a couple of them. 5 hours ago, Tyrann tweeted, "Effort is a direct reflection of interest."
Oh, wow. I'll give you interest or give you effort as how much you're interested in extending my contract and how much you're willing to pay me.
Could be that.
Wow.
44 minutes ago, "When I find out you don't like me, I make sure you don't like me some more."
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then this one. He quote tweeted, somebody shared, out of all the defensive backs, minimum 200 snaps in the slot last year, Tyrann Mathieu allowed the lowest completion percentage at 58.8%. He quote tweeted that and said, "I'm not a good football player. I'm getting old."
We'll see.
Seems like things aren't going the way Tyrann wants them to.
I mean,
in his negotiations.
A whole lot of these tweets that are just no meaning whatsoever that he keeps saying, but they all seem to have one theme. We need to gather these tweets and put it into like one, screenshot and one picture. Like, here are all the tweets of Tyrann Mathieu. You tell me if these are just coincidental or if there is a theme to that. All right, the theme yesterday was conference realignment, and going back a decade ago. Joining us now, a man who was all over the story when realignment was going on at the 2010, 2011, is Brett McMurphy from the Stadium Network, college football reporter, insider, watchstadium.com. Brett, I really appreciate the time. I know you are crazy busy, so let's get right into it. I'll ask you, what's the latest right now? What is the communication like since that report came out yesterday?
Well, I think the next step is, when does the SEC presidents get together and discuss the possible addition of Oklahoma and Texas? Sources told me in the last 24 hours that both Texas and Oklahoma are expected to notify the Big 12, possibly as early as next week, that they don't plan to extend the grant of rights, which expires in 2025. And I guess some people may be wondering, why do you let a conference know you're going to extend the grant of rights, which doesn't expire for 3 or 4 years? Is you want to get out of the contract before 2025. And even though they're contractually obligated to stay in the Big 12 through that time, as you guys know, and you mentioned previous realignment, these things can get negotiated and you can get out of deals early and move on. You pay a financial penalty, obviously. But, the fact that Oklahoma and Texas contacted the SEC about this, they're obviously serious about this. You don't contact somebody unless you have real interest to leave. And so now I think it's just basically very simple. It boils down to, will the SEC add Oklahoma and Texas? And as much as Texas A&M is protesting, I think it'll happen. I don't think it's if, I just think it's when.
Why the move now? The timing of it? Why the interest in leaving the Big 12 now and going to the SEC for Texas and Oklahoma?
Well, surprise, money. The TV deals are coming up. They're getting renewed, and so, if you make a move to a new conference, it makes your new conference more valuable. You can get more money that way. ESPN and CBS have deals with the SEC. The Big Ten TV deal is, like I said, that's the grant of rights. That's expiring in 2025, so they want to get out ahead of it. And also from the SEC's viewpoint, and I'm sure, I don't agree with it, but I'm sure some people will blame the SEC for, well, why are you doing this? You're potentially going to blow up a conference. The SEC was contacted by OU and Texas. The SEC did not recruit OU and Texas. And so you kind of you guys are in basketball country. I'll give you a basketball analogy. You're playing pickup ball. Do you want to be the one that chooses first, or do you want to wait and have the last pick? And so if you're the SEC and you think that at some point these power leagues are all going to go to 16 teams, do you want to be the first one at 16 and you get the first 2 picks, or do you want to wait and see what the Big Ten does, the ACC, the Pac-12 does, and then you get whatever's left? So, why it happened, during SEC media days is a great question. Obviously, I haven't confirmed this, but other people have reported it, that Texas A&M leaked it because they're basically trying to pull the ripcord emergency brakes on something to kind of try to derail it. But I think at this point it's too far moving along to stop this, unless the SEC decides they want to stay at 14, which they very well could. I just don't think that's realistic, though.
We talked about earlier in the show today, Brett, about the first go around that Missouri, A&M, and the SEC all went out of their way to make it clear that there was no recruiting from the SEC to Missouri and A&M. It was one-sided. It was A&M and Missouri recruiting and showing how good they are and what benefit they would bring to the SEC. And I think certainly, as you talked about, same thing going on here. It's Texas and Oklahoma reaching out to the SEC. What I would wonder is, while that would be the case, while the SEC doesn't want to be a conference that says we're going in recruiting teams to join us, you need to want to join us or reach out to us. If Texas and Oklahoma, if you find out that they're going somewhere else and, the Big Ten is interested in the Pac-12, wouldn't the SEC then be smart to then try to recruit Texas or Oklahoma? Or are they confident and content in their standing that if Texas or Oklahoma ends up going to the Pac-12 or the Big Ten, they're good either way?
Well, it's kind of like a game of poker. And I think, 5 years ago, if you would have talked to me, or if we did talk, I would have told you that, 10 years from now, we're going to have 4 16-team super conferences. But then in the last probably 2 or 3 years, I would have backed off of that and said, no, these conferences are at 14, and now we're going to expand the playoff to 12 teams. So I really don't see us getting to these 16-team super conferences. But this isn't like Boise State and UCF reaching out to the SEC. This is Texas and Oklahoma.
Yep.
And while it's different on the realignment front, like you mentioned from the first go around 10 years or so ago, where you don't really add schools to extend your footprint, it would give you the entire state of Texas. You're either an A&M fan or a Texas fan, so that gives you the entire state of Texas. And look, I'm from Oklahoma, so adding Oklahoma is not huge as far as footprint-wise, but certainly Oklahoma and Texas are both national brands, and we know what they mean to the Big 12 Conference. And so that's why if you're the SEC, you certainly have to listen to them, because if you think at some point the Big 10 is going to get to 16 or the ACC is going to get to 16, and you think that's inevitable, whether it's 2 years or 10 years down the road, and you've got these two options right now, to be honest, I couldn't. The only better option for the SEC, which can't happen, is Notre Dame, and they're contractually bound to join the ACC if they ever join a conference. So they can't get Notre Dame. So other than Notre Dame, there's no school out there that would be more attractive to the SEC as far as their footprint and what it would mean to the conference in Oklahoma and Texas. And so certainly that's what makes them most attractive. And, Eli Drinkwitz, Missouri coach, this morning had line of the day when he opens up and his press conference here in Birmingham, Alabama, and says, I guess the big thing yesterday was trying to figure out if horns down is going to be a 15-yard penalty in the SEC. And I asked Commissioner Sankey about it, and he just told me no comment. So Drink got a lot of laughs about that one.
Yeah, Brett McMurphy from Stadium Network. We played that Eli Drinkwitz clip in the previous segment. He is a character. He certainly is entertaining to listen to talk, and hopefully he continues to be successful at Missouri. There was, when Missouri and A&M were heading to the SEC, there were a number of other schools that had at least been reported that were interested. Florida State, I saw Louisville at the time, and there were, this feeling of this handshake agreement, this understanding that they would not add a school from a state that a member institution was already in. So Florida State can't join, and Louisville and some of these other schools. Is that still the case right now, or does Texas trump that sort of understanding or handshake agreement?
I'm glad you brought that up because I thought, I live in Florida, so I've, been covering the SEC for a long time. I actually thought that there was some kind of agreement like that, but when the news came out yesterday, I reached out to two different sources in the SEC, and they made it very clear there is no such agreement. There is obviously nothing legal or binding, and there's not even a gentleman's agreement. So, yeah, I think the perception that an SEC state cannot add another team in their state is not accurate. So there's nothing as far as that would prohibit the SEC from adding Texas, even though Texas A&M is already a member.
Visiting with Brett McMurphy, Stadium Network is our guest. WatchStadium.com is where you can go and check out his piece and the extensive reporting that goes along with that. Here in this school, or on this, in the show, we've got Corey Anderson, who is an alumnus of Oklahoma State. You've got Shane Summers, who is a K-State fan. That's been part of the conversation here, Brett. What happens to the schools left behind in the Big 12 if, as you said, not if, but when Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC?
This is kind of the breakdown I see. I see basically three main scenarios for the Big 12. One is you try to arrange a shotgun marriage with the Pac-12 and merge with them somehow, some way. And I'm not saying I know which one of these things are happening. I just think these are the three most likely options. So that's option one. Option two, you add Cincinnati, you add Boise, you add UCF, you add whatever group of 5 schools you can do to get up to 10 teams, 12 teams, 14 teams, or whatever, and you try to stay together like that. Or the option as an Oklahoma State grad that I would hate to see happen is it's like a bunch of roaches and you turn the light on and everybody scatters. And you'll have some schools going to the Big Ten. You may have one going to the ACC. You may have some trying to get in the Pac-12. You may have some drop down to Group of 5 conferences. And I think that's basically the three main options of what happens with the Big 12 if the OU and Texas thing goes forward. Will we go from a Power 5 to drop down to only 4 power conferences? That's a possibility. Certainly the Big 12 is going to do everything it can to stay together. But if, say Kansas is being, wooed by the Big 10, do they think they have a better future in the Big 10 than sticking around in a Big 12 conference without OU and Texas?
What would be the most likely scenario there? Because of those three, I would guess it'd be the lights come on and the roaches scatter.
I think it would be that, or if they could convince the Pac-12 to merge.
Mm-hmm. Which 4 schools, though? Then you're fighting over which 4 get into the Pac-12.
You may try to make it. Let's have a 20-team super conference.
Wow.
And you could have the 8 remaining schools. You could throw in Arizona and Arizona State. You've got 2 10-team divisions or pods or whatever you're going to do with it. Believe me, everything you've thought of in the past that you couldn't do, well, you can't do that. That's too many teams. It's too spread out. Forget that. I mean, they're trying to survive. I think the long-term worst solution is adding, just picking up additional Group of 5 teams.
Yeah. Because
at that point, you're not going to be able to compete against the other power leagues, and I think then we would see the power leagues shift from 5 down to 4 at some point, and obviously the Big 12 at that point, without Oklahoma and Texas, would be the weakest link of the 5.
What's the timeline on this, do you think?
Well, like I said earlier, I think Texas and OU are going to reach out to the Big 12 in the next possibly as early as next week. Then the SEC obviously has to make that decision. As far as a timeline on if they're approved and they join, I think they would join for the 2022 season. I mean, you're not going to make this decision and wait 5 years to do it. The same way that college football playoff is not going to announce we're recommending to go to 12 teams and then wait 5 years to do it. That's why I think you'll see the college football playoff start in a couple of years as well.
I threw out one of the biggest beneficiaries of this would be ESPN. in that they already have the SEC, and then they would be crippling Fox with Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12. Does that play a role in this at all, or is that sort of conspiracy theory that there's not the man behind the curtain, the pulling the strings on these conference realignment deals?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, I used to be at ESPN, so I've seen it from the inside and from the outside, and I think they get a bad for that specifically. I think they get a bad rap. The ESPN is not going to OU in Texas and saying, hey, if you go join the SEC, you're going to make more money. However, OU in Texas, I'm sure they have consultants, they have people that do these things for them, or they do them themselves. If they're considering a move like this, then yeah, they'll go to ESPN, they'll go to CBS, whoever, and say, hey, if we're aligned with this conference, what is our projected media rights going to be compared to if we're not aligned with these conferences? And the networks are honest with them. They can't give them the exact number down to the exact dollar, but they can give them a ballpark figure. I mean, they're gonna work with them, but so yeah, I'm sure that plays a part in it. OU and Texas aren't going to the SEC because they're going to make less money. I mean, they're going because of money. That's why we're going to a 12-team playoff. It's not to let more teams in. It's so they'll make more money. And so that's how this all ends up happening. Surprise, surprise! Everything in college athletics revolves around money. But yeah, any of these schools, whenever they leave conferences, they'll check with their TV partners and just run hypotheticals by them and say, hey, if we're in this league, if we're in that league, what's the difference in our media rights revenue? And those leagues then those networks are honest with them. But no, I don't. I love a conspiracy theory, but no, that ESPN is not going around shopping teams to other leagues. But make no mistake, those leagues are approaching ESPN and saying, if we do this, what's our financial outlook? How different is it than our current league?
Last one for you real quick. You've been gracious with your time, and I know you're busy, but the college football playoff, you mentioned expanding in a couple of years. Did that make it more of an option or viable or enticing for Texas and Oklahoma to leave the Big 12, where the winner of that conference is an automatic bid, whereas you join the SEC and it is a behemoth conference? Does the expansion, and maybe even expanding to 16 teams, make it more palatable to go to that conference and still feel like you've got an avenue to the college football playoff?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think ultimately they made this move based on the college football playoff, but knowing that it's at 12 instead of 4, increases your chances. But you could argue that they're going to have a tougher path to the playoff in the SEC than they would in the Big 12.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you win the Big 12, you're going to be one of the top 6 highest-ranked conferences. You've got an automatic bid. And the SEC, Nick Saban... Bad news, guys. Nick Saban's not going anywhere for a long time, so Alabama's always going to be there. But the flip side is you can finish second, third, and I went back and looked at the previous 9 years of the playoffs. There are a couple of years where the fourth-place team in the SEC would have been ranked in the top 12, would have gone to the college football playoff. Certainly that's not the case in the Big 12. You've got to be first or second and maybe with one loss to be in the top 12. In the SEC, you can have multiple losses and be in the top 12. So, yeah, it's harder to get the automatic bid if you're not in the Big 12, but you also don't have to run the table. You also don't have to go 12-0 or 11-1 to get a bid. In the SEC, you can actually lose 2 games and still have a shot. So I think it kind of evens out either way. But at the end of the day, I don't think this move had anything to do with, we're going to have a better chance to get in the playoff if we go to the SEC. It was, what's the long-term value of this by us jumping leagues and going from a league that's been shaky, it's lost 4 members in the last several years, to basically the top conference in college athletics?
Brett McMurphy from Stadium Network, college football reporter, insider. WatchStadium.com. Go check that out. A really extensive piece reporting on that. Brett, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Absolutely. There's Brett McMurphy. Again, Stadium Network. Go to WatchStadium.com. You can also follow him on Twitter. He's got all the information there. But WatchStadium.com, where he's got his sources and reporting on that. Since that news dropped yesterday that Texas and Oklahoma have reached out to the SEC, and then him saying that the timeline within the next couple of weeks as early as next week that the schools, Texas and Oklahoma, will officially notify the Big 12 that they are seeking another conference in realignment to join the SEC. And Brett McMurphy saying not if, but when, and as soon as the 2022 season. As he said, what's the point of joining a conference if you're going to wait 3 or 4 years? Just simply do that, negotiate the out in your media rights deal, and join the SEC. So looks like it's more and more of a possibility in the last 24 hours how things have changed, but more and more of a possibility that this is the last year of the Big 12 Conference. Shane?
I just saw Dennis Dodd just tweeted out about a minute ago, Big 12 ADs and CEOs meeting tonight at 5 o'clock to discuss the situation. So, of course, reactionary, now pre-actionary.
You think?
Well, I mean, you don't think.
You think OU and Texas are going to be there at those meetings, or are these the 8 remaining schools?
I would say the 8 remaining schools.
And I don't even think this is reactionary. I mean,
I'm mostly joking about the last time it happened. It felt like the Big 12 was way too reactionary.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, with this, I mean, it's like you don't expect the two that are getting the best deal in the conference to suddenly just be like, "Yep, we want to leave." I mean, I guess you could see it coming. You could say, "All right, there could be." You never know what's happening behind the scenes, if there's been momentum, if there's been talks towards new realignment happening. But this feels like a bombshell that was dropped on most of the country yesterday. I agree with you when Brett McMurphy was talking about his different scenarios. It doesn't sound feasible to me for the Pac-12 and the remaining Big 12 schools to merge to
20,
West
from
Virginia,
12 to 20.
West Virginia
right.
being West Virginia trying to travel to West Coast school like that just doesn't make sense.
No, West Virginia would make sense in the ACC.
In the ACC, yeah, especially if Notre Dame joins and you need an extra team.
Yeah, because you're at 15 right now, or 14 and a half. 15 basketball, 14 football, and Notre Dame
and West Virginia join would make sense.
Absolutely.
Right? I think that one thing to think about, though, is if you try to think about, okay, if the Pac-12 says let's take 4 schools and go to 16, I mean, what are those 4 schools? I think you have to include a team that we're probably not thinking about in BYU, because
it's interesting.
If Notre Dame is even potentially is BYU going to remain an independent? Because I think that with the footprint, with the rivalry with Utah, BYU is a program that has a huge national following, like Notre Dame. An entire religion follows them. I think that you would even potentially have one less Big 12 school that would have room for them, because if BYU sees the writing on the wall and what's happening, you might see them be willing to finally listen to the Pac-12. And if you're talking about that, then what happens is KU and K-State a package deal. Could they get into the Big Ten? Are their academic requirements up to snuff for them to be able to get into the Big Ten if they were to say we're a package deal? If they're not a package deal, would KU go somewhere and then K-State be left out? Oklahoma State, I feel like, is a good enough program. Like, Oklahoma State is good enough athletically to provide good competition and a good team that you would want in your conference. But bringing Oklahoma TV market, and you're the little stepbrother in the market. Like, Oklahoma State compared to OU, for one thing, Oklahoma's not a big TV market to want to bring in anyway, and it's mostly OU. Mm-hmm. So if it's about dollars and what Oklahoma State's really bringing to the table, I think they bring competitiveness to the table. I don't think they bring much as far as TV dollars or TV footprint or wanting to get a footprint in Oklahoma. So it comes down to, I don't know, this really sucks, man. I
don't think there's
I feel
any
really crappy about all this right now.
I don't think there's any question in my mind it's going to be. So the 3 options he said, the 3 scenarios he said it, because I was like, okay, what happens, as you say, not if but when Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC? What happens to the teams that are left behind, those 8 teams? And he says, I see 3 scenarios. 1, a shotgun marriage with the Pac-12 going to a 20-team super conference. Remember when we said a 14-team was a super conference, and then we were going to have 4 16-team super conferences? And now he's saying, well, there's maybe a scenario out there to where you would have a 20-team conference in the Pac-12. I don't think that's the case. He said scenario number 2, add Cincinnati, a Boise, a UCF, which makes the remaining Big 12 schools throw open their mouth a little bit.
Barf.
Houston, things like that. So you're just getting the scraps from, the AAC. Like, oh, we'll take those teams. And the
teams that are probably a little too good for that conference,
Yep.
but not they're 4A players.
Mm-hmm.
They're not quite AAA guys, but they're not quite big leaguers. and adding those teams to your
Because here's the position that the Big 12 is in with that particular scenario, and really what they're facing now with what seems to be, by so many different people, the end result of Texas and Oklahoma heading elsewhere is these other conferences are adding teams of value that they feel like bring value to their conference. The Big 12 would be adding teams to still exist. It wouldn't be which team brings the most value to us? We got our pick of the litter, right? No, it'd be, let's bring in Houston. Houston, let's get that done. It's a good basketball program is growing. Houston in the Big 12, the football program. I know they've got 5 fans at the football games, but maybe they'll have more. We bring them in. But at that point, you've already got Texas, right? You still have Tech and Baylor and TCU in the conference. So now you're adding Houston and just replacing them with Texas in a state that you already have the eyeballs of. So does that help you? UCF, you want to talk about the Big 12 footprint? People are talking about West Virginia traveling there. I know it's a B to get there, besides just not really being in the Big 12 footprint. It also sucks to travel there, where UCF, not so much. It's pretty easy in and out. As Ed Orgeron would say, a big city like Orlando, when you go there and you as a team together and you eat together in Orlando like that. It's an easy in and out for UCF, right? But you're still adding Boise, Cincy. You're adding schools that are let's just try to remain relevant, rather than the SEC is hey, let's go get some big dogs. The Pac-12 is going, we've got these 8 schools, we got our pick of the litter, and we can also throw in BYU. Let's pick the 4 best that we feel are best for us. The Big Ten's going, okay, we can go and grab 2 of these teams as well to get us to 16. Great. The ACC going, we can pick 2 more teams to get us to 16. What are the or 1 more team, I should say, to get us to 16 if Notre Dame, joins the conference. What's the best team for us to bring in? Where if the Big 12, if they're out looking, it's what are any schools that can keep us afloat right now? Can we just pump air into this raft to get us a little bit further down the road? And really, let's be honest, it's a Band-Aid on a gaping wound if they were to add those schools. That's it. It's what's the TV deal going to look like, right? If we talk about it's money. Yeah, people can say money isn't everything, but it's a big deal. It's a big driving force. And there's a reason these schools are going places that have a lot of money. They clearly feel like it matters to them. And if it matters to them, then let's not act like it doesn't matter to the schools that would be left behind, and what that would do to a TV rights deal for the Big 12 if you take Texas and Oklahoma out and you add Cincinnati and Memphis or Boise or UCF or Houston.
You're going to make me vomit.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to do that. But if you look at so I do think it's going to be the roaches when the lights come on, that it's going to be any port in a storm at this point with one of the 4 major conferences, or what would be the 4 major conferences left if this happens. I think West Virginia is an easy match for the ACC. I think Iowa State, maybe that's a Big 10 team. They've got 2 more schools that they could add if they want to get to 16. Maybe Iowa State joins them. It's clearly in the Big 10 footprint. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, about the Iowa State academics, but the Big 10 added Nebraska. So it wasn't exactly and that's nothing against Nebraska, by the way, but that was part of the conversation, that Missouri being an AAU school, that's why the Big 10 would prefer Missouri over Nebraska. But they didn't care ultimately at that point. They said, no, we want Nebraska, whether the academics or not. So again, not knowing about Iowa State, they may be amazing academics. I really don't know. But that would make sense from a footprint standpoint in that conference. That would leave 6 schools, and you say BYU, so 7 schools.
And I don't know if BYU would even be in the mix, right, but there was talk about them back when all this happened. They were going to stay independent. But if they see the writing on the wall and they think, wow, maybe even Notre Dame is going to be doing this because being part of one of these 16-team conferences, we don't want to be left out.
Here's a scenario that I'm really, really, really hoping doesn't happen. But this would be worst case scenario, and
I know where you're going.
Well, hold on.
I bet I know where you're. I'll tell you. I'll be honest. I'll tell you if I knew what you were about to say.
All right, very good. I am not rooting for this at all. Believe me, I am not. I want the local schools to succeed. All right. Let's say Iowa State goes to the Big 10. West Virginia goes to the ACC. BYU is not involved. So they got 4 schools that the Pac-12 can add out of Tech, Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State, KU, and K-State, in those 6 schools. They've got to take 4 of them. And K-State is one of the schools they want. And the Kansas legislators say, you can't go without KU. And Pac-12 says, okay, cool, we'll take the other 4. Cool, we'll take Tech, Baylor, TCU, and Oklahoma State. That's fine. Thanks, K-State. We're good. Or the Pac-12 says, no, K-State, we want you. And we'll take Oklahoma State and we'll take Tech and, Baylor or TCU. We want you, K-State, because of the history that's there and the program you've got. We respect what you guys do, how you support the program. We want that. We can help get into Kansas City a little bit with K-State. We'll do that. We want you, K-State. And they go, cool, peace out, KU. Like, that's the issue that KU is facing right now with football, and that is the unfortunate part of what has happened over these last 10 years, 13 years since Mangino, is just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, that you are in a position now to where of the 6 schools and really of the 8 schools, if you go down the list of the most coveted, KU comes in 8th. And if you take Iowa State and West Virginia out of there, KU comes in 6th with that. And if the Kansas legislators will then tie KU and K-State together, then I think there's a scenario they're both out. And again, that's worst case scenario, and I do not want that to happen. I mean, honestly, best case scenario would be Texas and Oklahoma not going anywhere, and let's just continue moving forward like this. Let's enjoy college football the way it is right now. Okay, we've seen realignment, we've seen all of that, but if that's not what's going to happen, then let's live in the reality and see what happens moving forward. But now it is absolutely any port in a storm with these schools, and they can sit there and, was it today at 5 o'clock they're having this meeting? So today at 5 o'clock, these remaining 8 schools, or 10 with Texas and Oklahoma, but I would say remaining 8 schools can get together and they can pledge their allegiance to each other. We've seen that before. Mm-hmm. We saw that in 2010 and 2011, people sitting in a room, looking in each other's eyes, pledging their commitment to that, and then leaving that and making phone calls immediately when you leave about where you're going to end up. Was Missouri a part of that? Sure. Oklahoma? Sure. But they weren't the only schools that were part of that. Every other school was like, let's see how coveted are we? Let's see what we can offer. Let's present our pros to these other conferences. What can we bring to the table there for them? That was going on with everybody. And if they're having a meeting today at 5 o'clock, they can sit there and look in everybody's eyes and say, we're in this together. Who can we add? What are we doing moving forward? But when that meeting adjourns and they leave, there's phone calls being made about what's in the best interest of Oklahoma State. What's in the best interest of Kansas State? What's in the best interest of KU, Tech, Baylor, TCU, West Virginia, Iowa State? I mean, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. And people have had their fun with Missouri over the years in the SEC. And they're worse off because they went to the SEC. They ain't dealing with this anymore. They're sitting over with a very secure place at the table. It may be a big table, and you might think they're a small member at that table, but their seat is solid. And they're looking at other tables falling apart. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. We'll continue rolling more Zone next.
The Zone with Jason Anderson.
Men lie, women lie, stats don't. But I also think stats are for losers. Final score is for winners.
Weekdays from 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
913-912-4810. A number of people pointing out, and I think certainly this is a possibility, of Iowa State and KU heading to the Big Ten.
And that was my thought. That's where I thought you were going to go. Right. I think it's more likely that KU gets, because K-State's a better football program.
That wouldn't be worst case scenario to me, is if KU and K-State find landing spots in one of the Big Four. The worst case scenario would be the Big Four find other teams and KU and K-State are both left out. That would be awful.
I don't think KU will get left out just because I understand basketball isn't what moves the needle, but they are a premier. If the Big Ten's going to add 2, and it's 2 of these schools, I think it would be Iowa State and KU. And I think K-State would be the one on the outside looking in.
100% my biggest fear. I agree with you 100%.
So if BYU goes to the Pac-12 along with the other schools in the Big 12 outside K-State and West Virginia goes to the ACC, then 9 out of the 10 schools would find a
No, that would
Big
still
Four.
leave. If BYU were to go to the Pac-12, then only 3 of the 4.
That's what I'm saying. Tech, Baylor, and TCU, therefore K-State would be out.
And Oklahoma State. If BYU goes, you can only take 3 Big 12 schools.
Yeah, Oklahoma State wouldn't be left out there.
I don't think so.
No, they would take Oklahoma State. So it would be a K-State and another school that it's like, okay, who's going to end up there? But even if BYU is left out, does the Pac-12 choose K-State or Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then it would be one of those. Like, again,
I think
it sucks.
From a perspective of Pac-12, like we were just talking about this during the commercial break, I feel really gutted right now because, like, Oklahoma State is a good program. They have good football and they have good basketball. Not great, but good. Your conference elevates itself by a team like Oklahoma State coming to your conference as far as the games on the field, the games on the court. But they don't offer you anything financially. Getting into the Oklahoma market means nothing, especially when the Oklahoma market mostly cares about OU. So Oklahoma State, while they offer a good on-field product, while K-State can offer a good on-field product in football and, you know, some years in basketball, it's not necessary. That's not what this is about. It's not about the product on the court. It's about eyeballs and TV markets and what you can do to kind of raise the. That's why I think KU finds a landing spot, because between Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, K-State, Iowa State, I get it that football sucks at KU. They are at least trying. They're showing. They've put money into it. They've invested. They've made bad decisions, but they're trying to get better at football, and they legitimately have a basketball program that resonates on a national level.
Yeah, they got a national brand.
That people will tune in to see. So I think KU finds their landing spot regardless because of basketball. It will save them. But if you're talking about Oklahoma State, K-State, like, as much as we like them and think, hey, K-State's competitive at football, they can beat OU, and Oklahoma State can do this, and Cade Cunningham, and he's going number 1 in the draft. Yeah, you can get some good games out of that, but that's not what moves the needle. That's not what makes it financially sound. And so this feels like a gut punch today because it feels, especially hearing from Brett McMurphy, who was so on this back in 2010 and 2011, the fact that he says it's not a matter of if, but when OU and Texas go to the SEC. Like, if I'm the Pac-12 today, I am full court pressing to try to get OU and Texas to come to us to say, hey, we'll go to 16. We'll go OU and Texas will come, and you can pick the 2 people you also want to bring from the Big 12.
Texas, you get a school from your state. Oklahoma, you get a school from your.
Yeah,
you can bring Oklahoma State. Texas, you choose Tech, Baylor, or TCU.
You guys pick. You guys pick who you want to come with you. If you don't want the other team from your state, fine by us. If you want Kansas and Iowa State to come with you, whatever. Like, if I'm the Pac-12, I'm going all in on that. Now, it sounds like the car might be too far down the road towards the SEC, but this just feels like a gut punch, because I know that my school, while they can do good things on the field or on the court, they don't have much to offer. They need, like, Oklahoma State needs OU. And I feel like K-State almost needs KU, even though KU football is trash.
It's interesting.
They need KU's national presence in basketball, and it sucks when you're the school that doesn't have a whole lot to offer.
It's interesting because, you know, like I saw a couple people earlier today that is like, you know, what does Texas even do in the Big 12? Why would the SEC want Texas? And like, just take a look at the population. You can just go ahead and look. Notre Dame ain't done anything in a long time, and everybody would, fall over themselves to get Notre Dame to join their conference. So it's the brand, it's the eyeballs, it's the TV network, it's the dollars that brings that. Oklahoma, the same thing. So that's certainly one part of the entire conference, or the entire discussion that goes along with that. And I don't know how much the conference commissioners and the ADs in these different conferences, what they would covet, what they would want more when they get into these meetings and they talk about the pros and cons of each of these schools. Kansas does have a national brand, and you would get Kansas City as a part of that, but you're not getting Kansas City in football. Now, TV network may not care. Like, you know what? KU, Kansas City watches, we're getting that. Football, basketball, we're not going to differentiate between the two. Kansas City, they're going to watch KU. So, therefore, we're going to get the Kansas City market, whether it's football, basketball,
and they do the
either
research.
way.
They know that there's more KU alums in Kansas City than there are K-State.
Right, and they know the ratings with KU basketball, and they can maybe bet on the future and say KU football is going to get this figured out, and therefore then, they're going to be respectable. Not going to be great, but can they be Vandy? In the SEC, can they be
a team where their fans would actually tune in and watch?
Yeah, right.
All you have to do is go to bowl games, like be a 6-6 team, and teams are watching. You're watching those games.
So that's the question of how much there's the view and weight they would put on that aspect, knowing that you get the basketball brand that comes along with that. Because we haven't seen a conference add a team based on a basketball brand yet. Now, you can make a case in the ACC when they added Syracuse and they added BC and they added Louisville and who else was along with it? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Pitt. So when they added those schools, that, okay, well, Syracuse, is that because of football? Is it because of basketball? Or is it the ACC says we can get a pretty damn good brand like Syracuse into the ACC and there's New York, right? The Big Ten is like, let's bring in Rutgers. We get New York, and ain't nobody watching Rutgers, man. But that's fine. You can say that's part of your footprint. At the time, when they were deciding between Connecticut, Cincinnati, and Louisville as the final spot in the ACC, maybe basketball had something to do with it at the time. But remember back, that was Charlie Strong and Teddy Bridgewater, and they just got through punking Florida in the Sugar Bowl there, while also having a pretty good basketball program, by the way, that was winning a national championship. But football was winning the Big East and beating Florida in the Sugar Bowl while UConn was sort of floundering and Cincinnati was struggling. It made it an easier decision because, yeah, you can placate the ACC basketball schools like Duke and go, hey, we're helping you guys out. We're bringing in a basketball school here, and it's not just about football. But in reality, in that meeting, it was about, of these schools, who gives us the best overall. Well, Louisville football is pretty damn good, and they're starting to come on. And they already have that basketball brand. Mm-hmm. That's what I think is where, when we look at that, what's missing from KU is if this was 2 years later and Leipold, gets them into a bowl game, and you go, you know what? They're doing enough there football-wise. We're getting the national brand. We're getting Kansas City. This is going to be a coveted school. When we can't be in those meetings, if you're the Pac-12 or you're the Big Ten and you're going, mark Kansas off, football sucks, not going to do it. Can we get Kansas City with K-State, a football program? Do we need to worry about the national brand of basketball with KU when we're already in the Big Ten? Maybe the Pac-12 does to bring some more cachet to that conference just overall with that. I don't know. The basketball program should hold some weight for KU, and it might hold enough weight for KU.
Especially from a conference
yeah.
that for years has been kind of laughed at about not being strong enough for the NCAA tournament, not having number one seeds, that kind of stuff. KU's a perennial number one seed. You bring that brand over there. Like, they've got some basketball programs that are good, but to be able to add that to you to where you're not every year when tournament selection's coming around, it's not like a laughing stock about, we're only going to have 2 Pac-12 teams in, or 3 Pac-12 teams in. And
you're also getting, by the way, and this, it's, I'm moving more and more on the side of KU and the basketball brand being coveted. Obviously, the basketball brand being coveted, but I mean the overall portfolio that KU would bring. And that would be, as you talk about with the Pac-12, the struggles in the tournament of getting teams in, even though this last year was pretty good. So from that standpoint, but how often are people staying up and watching Pac-12 basketball? For Bill Walton and Dave Pasch and their fun interactions, probably. But if you add Kansas, you would bring Midwest eyeballs to watch. You'd also bring Kentucky fans, Duke fans, IU fans, fans of other blue blood programs that might be watching and saying, I'm going to stay up and watch this Kansas UCLA game because these are two teams we may see in the tournament later on. So you might increase the ratings from that standpoint too, when people on the East Coast ain't staying up to watch, West Coast basketball.
Yeah. UCLA, Arizona.
Yeah.
Even though that could be a good matchup there.
They're not. Their games start at 9:00. They're not staying up, at 10:30 to watch the beginning of a Pac-12 game. It's not Oregon State and Stanford. They're not doing that. Would they do it for a Kansas game that's on right after, let's say, Kentucky? A Kansas game that comes on right after Duke? You might. So maybe that helps as well. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. We'll continue rolling. More Zone next.
The Zone with Jason Anderson.
Stop saying but. I just told you the clock was running and we had a penalty. You want to give them the ball back? No. You don't play. You don't know it. That's just plain and simple.
Were you happy with that drive?
Was I happy with the drive? No, we didn't score points. It's the dumbest question you could ask. What?
Weekdays from 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Jesus, 20.
All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. The Zone, presented by Google Fiber. Jason Anderson, Corey Anderson, and Shane Summers. We head up until 2 o'clock. Coming up the next segment, we will talk with Joe Goldberg at the top of the noon hour. We will also play some sports or leisure coming up at 1 o'clock, presented by Johnny's Tavern. So we will do some of that. Also some other Royals nuggets we may get into as well, along with Ryan McBroom being optioned down to AAA.
Big news.
I know.
That's moving the needle today.
Along with Bobby Witt hitting his first home run last night for Omaha. First home run at AAA last night for Omaha. He's OPSing at like 3.8. I'm just joking. It's literally impossible. But still, he's OPSing at a pretty good rate. He went, 3 for 5 last night with a home run? It's a good player, that Bobby Witt Jr.
Jorge Soler, back-to-back days with a homer.
He is figuring it out.
He's heating up.
There it is. 8 days.
He's on fire.
God. Probably get 2 of the team's, top 2 prospects, both of them.
I think so.
Why wouldn't you? Man, they are going to get a king's ransom for Soler. Great. Joe Goldberg next.